am Michelle Teheux. I write Untrickled on Substack, and with me today, or actually not with me, we're co-doing this. I'll let you introduce yourself, Allison.
Yeah, I am with you. I'm with you on most things, actually. I'm Allison Tate, and I write a Substack called Everybody Inherits Something. So it's about inheritance, but I love talking about marriage. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm excited to get into it.
So, I'm pretty open about most things in my life. I've talked openly at different times on different platforms. I'm on my second marriage. My first one was 15 years. I was completely surprised when the marriage ended. I did not see it coming. There seem to be three kinds of divorce. One is we'd been growing apart for years, and one is I came home and he or she was in bed with the neighbor, and mine was what, what. So that was I had put my last paycheck when that divorce happened toward
Mm-hmm.
buying a really expensive, really nice leather couch, biggest splurges of our marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't worried about it. It's like I'll just like pay this off. This is
Yeah.
getting delivered. I'll just put my entire paycheck to pay it off. And suffice it to say, I never saw that sofa. It went directly to his new apartment.
Ah,
And wow, how am I gonna buy groceries for the kids and I this week? So that
yeah.
was that was my experience, and in spite of that, when I remarried 4 years later, we once again put all of our money in the same pot, which I think is not the best idea for everybody, but it
Yeah.
does work for me. My husband and I, who have been married almost 20 years now, we don't really argue about money, but,
Mhm.
probably if I had gone to Allison and said, "Do you think it's a good idea for me to, marry this foreign guy who all of our courtship has been over, the internet and just a few, international visits?" I met him in person, but as soon as I met him, he went right back to Holland, and then he came over here to marry me about 20 years ago. And should we just put all of our money together and it'll be fine? What advice would you have given me?
It just makes me laugh just hearing it. I'm like, oh, oh, it's funny. Yeah, no, I definitely would have said not to do that. But it looks like it's worked out, so that part's good.
It's worked out, but it's worked out because neither of us is a big spender. I think if one of us had been
Yeah.
if one of you is a saver and one of you is a
Mhm.
spender, we're gonna have, in my non
Yeah.
opinion, that's gonna be a more of a problem. If you're both spenders, that's gonna be a different kind of problem. And
Uh-huh.
like, "Oh my god, should I or should I not spend this $1 on a pack of gum?" Which is where
Right.
we are. You're probably probably any system would work for us because oh, god, brief story. Before, when you could still rent movies, I had seen the movie Boyhood, which matched up really well with my son's age. He was a young adult.
Yeah, that's a great
Great
movie.
shot in real time. He and I
Uh-huh.
went to it and had kind of like a mother-son date night. We went out to dinner, we saw the movie, we had a great discussion. Then
Yeah.
my was already out of the house, came home for a weekend, and I said, "Let's all watch this movie together." I sent my husband to the video store. I get a call 15 minutes later, and he's like, "This movie is pretty expensive." I'm like, "What are you talking about? How expensive can it be?" He's like, "'Cause we always got, like, the 10 for a dollar from Family Video or something." He's like,
Uh-huh.
This movie is $3." And I'm like, "Would you rent the movie?" I'm like, "Call the bank in the morning and transfer money over, okay?"
Right.
So, the whole family teases him about this, but that gives you an idea of how freaky
Yeah,
both are. I've loosened up a little bit. I'm not sure he has.
that's so funny. That's amazing. I love hearing that, and I love hearing that the saver spender thing. First, I'll just introduce myself, but then I'll tell you a story about saving and spending. So I am Allison Tate, and I have never been married. I think I'm in kind of a unique demographic in having never been married, never divorced, never married, happily single my entire adult life. I have cats who are running around here somewhere. So no children, no spouse, nothing. But I'm highly interested in marriage. I teach family law and I write about marriage and I write about problems with marriage and problems with divorce. And um, that is of great interest to me how people organize their financial lives around marriage. But I remember, when I was in law school, which kills most of your brain, but you get a couple interesting things like here and there. And I took a class about marital property, and the woman who was teaching it was a practitioner, and this was in New York, and she did matrimonial law in New York. And she said the biggest reason people get divorced, she said, she said, "I don't even think it's adultery." She said, "Just because a saver is married to a spender."
Oh, that makes sense.
She's like, "That's the biggest." She's like, "It's a very big problem." She's like, "2 savers, you can work it out. 2 spenders, like, you might have to, like, work something different out, but you're gonna be in alignment, right? You have the same sort of approach to living." She said, "But when a saver marries a spender," she's like, "it's very difficult." So that,
I
like, really tracks onto what you were saying.
Yeah. Oh, because, you hear about people who, their spouse comes home with, like, a new big screen TV or some
Yeah,
other item, and it
yeah,
wasn't and if my husband did that, I would immediately make an appointment with the doctor, like, "You've
right.
got to come in, something is really wrong."
Yeah, it's true, right? It's like it's a different approach to things. I have, so in one of my classes, I have students like kind of write weekly assignments and they kind of develop like fictional clients and they make up anybody. I've read like, we do wills and I've read like 50 wills for Lisa Vanderpump and,
Mhm.
for like all kinds of people. But I have one assignment where I make them talk about whether their client's a saver or a spender.
Mm.
And the thing is, everybody likes to think that they're savers and they're not all savers too. Like,
M
I know enough about
okay.
myself, like, I'm a spender. Like, like, I know it and I embrace it and, like, my bank account doesn't, but, like, we work with it. But it's interesting, like, people like to think they're savers and you gotta, like and honestly, like, neither one's better, at the end of the day. They both have benefits, right? You just have to, like, temper them both.
Well, I grew up I'm also very candid about this. I grew up, my formative years were in a trailer. We lived in a trailer from the time I was born until
Mhm.
my parents were buying building a house by themselves. I don't mean they met with a construction crew or something. I
Yeah,
mean, like, hammered and nailed, they laid the foundation. The
yeah,
only thing they really got help with was, raising the roof trusses because that requires several strong people. So,
mhm,
remember the day that was done. But they did everything else themselves. They figured out the wiring and plumbing, and this was long before YouTube. So, yeah, if you grow up in a trailer, you've got a certain mindset. And interestingly, my sister, who had been, passed away, but she was 4 years younger than me, and
mhm,
parents were a little better off by the time she came along. So we were not quite as poor in her formative years, and she and I had a different view of money. Like I can remember going to the laundromat once a week, and my mom would give us, I think 50 cents, like a quarter to share a soda, and another quarter to go to the candy store that was next to the laundromat. And
yeah,
some I knew she didn't really have it, I'd be like, "No, I don't want anything." My sister would be like, "Oh, I do." I'd be like, "I'm trying to save mom 50 cents here."
right,
I knew she didn't have it, but that went right over my
yeah,
sister's head because
right,
she I mean, we were still living in a trailer, but things were a little bit better by then, and then we finally moved into the house they'd built, and
uh-huh,
we certainly weren't well off, but at least we had a house, not a trailer, and my mom had gone back to work and, was doing well, and, it was just a very different
yeah,
it was very different, but I still remember, like, wearing a lot of hand-me-downs and a lot of homemade clothes, and
mm,
I remember fried bologna sandwiches. I'll give myself a plug. The trailer park well, we didn't live at a trailer park, we lived in a lot in a small town.
uh-huh,
Um, I always particularly take offense when people talk about trailer trash or something because that actually was a very wise thing my parents did. They bought what was actually a very nice had been very expensive trailer. It was in
mhm,
They lived in it for, I don't know, like, 13 years or something like that,
yeah,
sold at the same price they bought it for, and moved into the house, and because they built that house themselves, they
mhm,
had almost no debt,
yeah,
which bit me in the butt when it came time to student, college aid because the system was a little bit different back then, and it was a lot harder to get, and I
mhm.
dime, until I
Oh, wow. Yeah,
got and then I got a Pell Grant that covered my last year of college, which was,
mhm,
I guess, a little bit helpful, but
right. Like, a little bit too little, too late, but helpful, at
yeah,
least something, right? Yeah. Do you know how your mom and dad organized money? Did they, like, talk about money and
all in one pot.
yeah, all in one pot? Yeah.
And, I think because they had been so poor when they started off, and neither of them came from money. My dad came from a big family that lived on
Mhm,
a farm in his formative years,
yeah.
and mom's dad was a logger, basically. So
Mhm,
there, I think neither one of them had a taste for fine living. They
yeah,
just never this was a small town, and when would they have picked up a taste for fine living?
yeah,
And around them. I mean, I was really surprised when I went to college that everybody seemed rich because
yeah,
I grew up in a small town where some
yeah,
people did have money, but they money in a small town is different, or at
Yeah.
least back then. There were a lot of farmers who probably had $1 million net,
Mhm.
many millions now.
Yeah.
They still, wore Walmart and Kmart clothes and
Right. Right, right, it looked different, right? Like, yeah,
yeah,
my mom is from Nebraska and, you know, it looks a lot different, right? If,
people
you could own a ton of land and you could have, right, all of this farmland and, like you said, be worth millions of dollars and, it's not one of those things that it's not obvious.
no, and also I think it in the culture I came from small town in central Illinois, I think it would have been looked down upon
Yeah,
and to be better than other people.
yeah,
You had gone too far. I mean,
yeah,
not that nobody had money or nobody had a nice house or anything
yeah,
like, but the type of things you see now, uh, you know, sort of a Roseanne existence is kind of
yeah.
what from. So, and my husband, it's odd because he was the youngest of 8, so his family certainly didn't have any
Oh,
money,
wow.
and,
Yeah.
so even though he, well, is Dutch and lived in the Netherlands,
Uh-huh.
because we both grew up in fairly similar I didn't have a big family, but
Mhm.
a similar structure. We had
Yeah,
pretty similar ideas about money
yeah,
and about how people should live. Whereas at the time I had this extremely wealthy, never had to work in her life, generational wealth friend.
mhm,
She had nothing. Our money ideas were 180 degrees.
yeah,
Like I have way more in common financially with my husband, who grew up in an entirely different continent
yeah.
than this woman who grew up, a few miles away.
Yeah, I think it's a really rated or understudied factor for divorce, right? Or at least for marital conflict is the fact that you don't have the similar ideas. And not just save or spender, but just like how you manage your money or, what you do with it or investing or just thinking about money, right? And like what you would do or, going on vacation or just sort of how you approach spending, even if you're a saver, right? How you approach money is like a really big orientation for, towards, like, how you live, and it makes a big deal if you don't agree on it.
Although I've always thought it was a little bit weird that I met my first husband in college. We dated for like 3 years. We had a long engagement
Yeah.
and both came from very similar backgrounds. His family was from a different small town.
Mhm.
Um, or just a whole lot of similarities. I remember
Yeah.
think consciously at the time when I was deciding to marry him, we have a lot in common. We're
Mhm.
from the same background. I think both of our parents were still married.
Mhm.
I thought this all bodes well.
Yeah.
Came from strong families, parents still married, small towns, simple
Yeah.
life. Yeah, that should be good. And
Should work. On paper,
uh,
that's great, right?
I mean, it's 15 years. It wasn't like
Yeah.
it was, as far as I knew, it was good as far as I knew, it was good for 14 and 3/4 years. But
Right.
when he thought that, I'll never know. But
Yeah.
then second marriage, again, he came over here to visit some relatives, including a friend of
Mhm.
he introduced us. I knew immediately I was going to marry him. He had just put everything he owned
How did
into
you know that?
I knew it immediately because
You just knew.
I could just tell.
Yeah.
My dad that night and said, I've met my new husband." And, but I didn't tell him that because I first had rid of my boyfriend.
How long did you wait until you told him?
He was back in Holland because I had to get rid of my boyfriend who was
Okay.
there that day. Because this was supposed to be just a meeting, it wasn't like
Right. Yeah. You're like, "I got a few things I gotta clean up. Hold on."
and yeah, so I had to get rid of the boyfriend, and he
Okay.
had to go back and live his life, and so but we started, like, emailing and then talking over, the old Yahoo chat for most of you will never even remember. It's
Back
how
in the day.
internet, and, we talked every day, and, in a few months, I realized I'm gonna have to scrape up the money to
Yeah.
and then visit this guy, which was a whole thing to arrange. I think
Mhm.
a round trip ticket for, I can never remember now if it was just under 300 or just under 400.
Okay.
But a lot of money to me as a single mom
Yeah.
working at a and, like, that really sealed it, but I found out later he already had decided to marry me too.
Okay, good. Oh, good. So independently you came to the same conclusion, which is
Yeah,
great. Now
but
when you married though, and you'd had a divorce already, were there any, like, thoughts that you should not have joint, like, accounts and that you should not do a one pot strategy?
I couldn't even imagine doing it any other
No
way.
way. Okay.
I The experts say that you shouldn't do it this way, and I kind of agree because I've seen it go wrong for other people.
Yeah.
Seen a lot of injustice, probably not as much as you've seen,
Yeah.
but probably rattle off some
Yeah.
amazingly.
I mean, I saw the ones that go wrong, right? So, like, that's what
Yeah, yeah,
that's what the courts are full of and the case, textbooks are full of, so it's like that's everything that goes wrong.
yeah.
Yeah.
But
Um, did you talk about money though? Did you talk about like make a joint like a did you make a specific, explicit decision to do the joint pod?
yeah, well, for one thing, this will surprise a lot of Republicans. I shouldn't say Republicans, I should say MAGA people who think that when a person comes over here, the government just showers them with money. Not o- not do that because I mean he's a completely legal immigrant. We had to go through a ton of paperwork. It's actually
Mhm.
difficult, and the fiance visa is one of the easier ways. But I had to sign so many documents, so many times over and over, saying
Mhm.
I understand that
Yeah.
will not qualify for any sort of aid. If you
Right.
qualify it, no matter what happens, the
Yeah.
absolute thing that we would qualify for is emergency medical care. If you
Uh-huh.
go to the emergency room, they'll treat you. That's the only thing you can
Yeah.
get. Anything else,
Yeah.
nobody, but it's true. I assure you. So,
Well,
um,
I
I knew
believe you.
that you would not be allowed to work at first.
Yeah.
I also knew that, that even if I lost my job, I wouldn't be,
Mhm.
get any sort of assistance that I would
Yeah.
otherwise be able to get. I knew all that. I went into it understanding that. Had to
Mhm.
1,000 times saying that. And so, he brought over some money, but he had just right before we met, he'd sold his house, he put everything into this store, which he ended up walking away from to come over here. So I knew
Okay.
we're not gonna have any money. I already don't have any money. He's gonna come over
Yeah.
here just money from selling some possessions basically, and, it's gonna be tight, and it was.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
we're pretty okay with that, but I had
Yeah.
a house car, I had
Mhm.
a hold full of stuff, so it's not like if he moved over here and had to set up a place to live, he just moved into my
Yeah.
life.
So, did you put him if you own your house, did you put him on the title?
I didn't initially because it was gonna cost money to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Then, after 2 years, we moved out of that house, bought the house I'm in right now, and by then, he was, and then we
Yeah.
I think, refinanced the other house, and he's on I think
Okay.
now. I should know that, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. That's a bold move too, to get married and automatically just put somebody right on something that you bought and, a possession that you had would be separate property.
Because that
Um,
was the very greatest part of
yeah.
my so-called wealth, which isn't really wealth, but
Yeah.
what we have is mostly tied up in
Yeah.
house and in the previous house, which we weren't able to sell in 2008,
Yeah.
so we out.
Yeah, I mean, most people's wealth is their home, right? The family home, the family car. If they work for an employer who has, a pension, like, or retirement fund or life insurance, like that's if people have wealth, like that's the biggest forms of wealth that they have. So it makes sense, right? And it's like you don't necessarily want to just put somebody else on a title right away when that would be your source of wealth.
I think you should be cautious about it. Although
Yeah.
to be fair, I live in a small town where housing is really cheap. So, even though I own one, the other one almost paid for,
Yeah.
both of us together would not be enough to buy a house in a lot of, in a
Right. Right.
so it's all
Yeah.
kind of but for me, it's a lot because this is
Yeah.
where I am, baked into this low cost of living area. If I ever had to move to New York City, I guess I'd have to find a nice dumpster and
Yeah.
living inside
There's a number of nicer and not so dumpsters, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I would a nice dumpster to live in if I moved to New York City.
Yeah. So it's interesting. We kind of talked about. I'd mentioned like we've talked about prenups a little bit when we were chatting before, and I know there's been all these articles about prenups being on the rise, and millennials and even Gen Z like enjoy, uh, not enjoy, but it like actually are thinking about prenups in a way that people haven't for a while. And I always say it's a good idea to get a prenup, but not because people necessarily need a prenup. But I think what prenups do that it doesn't necessarily always happen is it makes people talk about money. And I think that's the important part because I think a lot of people just like, okay, well, we'll open a joint account. They don't think about it. Like, okay, well, let's buy this, and they don't necessarily think about it. And, I don't care what people do, right? I think there's better, better, it's all situation dependent, right? It really depends, like, what kind of assets you have, who you are, how you get along. It's completely situation specific. But I really think every situation people are better off the more they talk about it. And so that's what I think like prenups do is like give people the occasion to just talk about it. say like, "Hey, we're gonna get married and this is gonna happen," right? Like this will be the change. I always say like my one of my big things is they should give people when they get married, they should give them a pamphlet basically about like their marital property rights. Just like a little like public service announcement. And then they can, talk about it.
And one other big thing that we should mention is children.
Yeah.
I've got 2 children from my first marriage.
Mhm.
When I married Hari, they were going I had just moved, to a little bit smaller house because I
Yeah.
thought the marital house was yeah, it was really, an amount a monthly amount that I paid with great difficulty. So I
Mhm.
scaled way down and
Yeah.
bought a smaller house, and, let's see, my son was getting ready to go into junior high, my daughter was getting ready to go into high school. They were gonna have to change schools anyway, so
Mhm.
that's the time to time it because I had
Yeah.
did the to move or not. So I just went ahead and decided to move, and, so at the same time I had, kids moving to a new school and a new house,
Mhm.
and then I also brought in a stepdad, and it went
Yeah.
great, but again, a lot of times that doesn't go so great, but, it went great. It was
Yeah.
smooth, we didn't have drama, they were excited to have him
That's
there,
great.
they long it really was nice.
Yeah.
But if it had not gone nicely and I'd already set it up, it could have been a nightmare.
Could
I
have been
think
a nightmare.
I'm
Yeah.
really cautious about second marriages when there's kids involved.
Yeah. I think that's true. This is my let's see, here's my child.
Oh,
It's Bertram. I always like to tell everybody he has a pet trust fund, so he's taken care of. Somebody in the chat said, it's nice to have put everything in one pot because you can actually really get a clear picture of what you have, and it's
that's
easier to do planning. And I think that's like a really good point. Um, if you don't know what people have and they're separate accounts, there's benefits and there's drawbacks to that, and so it's really nice to have clarity into into the joint resources and what exactly it helps. I think that's right. It helps with planning too.
my thing was always, if you have one pot and if you have children together, and this didn't apply to my second husband and I 'cause, we didn't have any children together,
Yeah.
but if everybody's paying their own expenses, what happens if, A, you decide to have children and then you decide to stay home for a few years so you aren't earning
Hmm.
how can you even do that? Is
Yeah.
your husband gonna say, "Well, okay, but, boy, you're racking up the debt because 'cause I've been paying
Hmm.
every month and you've been home for 2 years, and so your
Yeah.
share home he comes to da da da." Is it gonna be like that? Or is it gonna
Yeah.
be or is he gonna say, "I'm gonna pay you an allowance because you're staying home with the kid?"
Right.
It's something you have it sounds very uncomfortable
Or
to
actually pay you like fair labor wages for what you're doing, which of course like no one can afford because like that would be, if we actually compensated women for the like home
Oh,
work that they did, right, it would be a whole different ball game in the world.
I actually read a case that I started off thinking, "She's horrible," and then realized she's got a perfect point, and if I remember right, they were both very high earners, and they'd been together for a few years, they felt stable, and they made really good money, both of them, and then they wanted to have a baby, and she said, "Pay me," I think it was $50,000 to have a baby.
Mhm.
I thought, "That's terrible," and then I read her reasoning, I thought, "She's absolutely right."
That's really right, yeah.
Because she's the one that has the uterus and the breasts for birthing and breastfeeding, and not only the fact that, pregnancy is not always a walk in the park, it
Right.
certainly not for me, um,
And I mean, just like the law, I mean, this is a big flexion point for joint finances, right? Because I mean, the cost of childcare often means that somebody will stay home or they'll work a job that, they'll sort of forego work opportunities. They'll, take a part-time job or they'll go part-time. And it's a real point where, the earnings in the couple diverge and where, they really start seeing a difference. And this is also like why we have gender wealth gaps, right?
yes,
Because you have these moments where people choose to stay home, and again often it's usually women, and even if it's not the woman, right, it's somebody who sort of gets feminized and then is vulnerable in the marriage, and
mhm.
like that's where this is where the real problems start because we don't have affordable childcare, right?
That is a big part of it, or some kind of a way. We don't have any kind of way, we just and politically, we're telling women to have children and stay home, and, I stayed home with my kids. I gave birth to my daughter in December of 1989. my son in 92, and I
Yeah,
back to work until 1997 when my son went into kindergarten.
yeah,
And those were great years for me. I loved them. I was involved in the community. I started 2 different businesses. I mean, and it was all stuff that I could do with my kids. I had a home business in the home, and then a business at a strip mall with 2 other moms. We took our kids to work with us because I wanted my kids with me.
yeah,
And, but, I didn't make a lot of money with these little side businesses. They were more just like, you know, they were fun and they helped a little bit because my first husband was a teacher. And the first few years he didn't
yeah.
do, but then right about the time we got divorced, he started, he had moved up the income ladder enough that we had like just a couple of years of,
Mhm.
relative comfort. And then he was gone and I was right back to, where I had been before.
Right.
And that was really difficult for me because, he retired in his 50s, and I don't know that I'll ever be able to totally retire
Mhm.
because that 7 or so years that I was at home and I
Yeah,
was Social Security
yeah,
and, I wasn't putting any money into any 401k or
right.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really screwed myself financially, and I don't regret the time with my kids.
Mhm.
I loved it. It was great. I think it was good for them. I enjoyed it. Some people
Yeah,
stayed bored. I kept busy. I loved it.
yeah.
Man, am I paying for it now financially?
Yeah, and, and this is one of the things that, basically divorce reform was supposed to take care of, but obviously hasn't, right? Like, the
Yes,
idea that when you get divorced, you're just gonna divide up everything, and then the person who, was outside of the paid labor market and, foregoing all of these work opportunities, like, that person's gonna just get half the wealth, and it's gonna turn out okay. Like, that's definitely I mean, your example, like, that's not always gonna work out. And so you can't necessarily and I think this is one of the problems with marriage, right? It provides these incentives for people to think that they can stay at home and forego earning, um, and that it will all be okay in the end. And maybe it will, but it's not necessarily clear, right? It's not necessarily clear that the marriage ends and you have now foregone and again, then trying to get back in the labor market, right? When you're, you have on your resume like 7 years of, of home management and childcare, it's a tough road, right? It's an uphill battle in the employment market.
I unfortunately returned let's see, I returned to work in 1997 and my divorce was in 2002. So I had some years of working, but I was in journalism, which is notoriously very lowly, very badly paid. But
Yeah.
I could not, and this was before newspapers had imploded. I mean, it's much worse now. But at
Yeah.
the time, I didn't realize, and nobody realized that newspaper jobs were going to basically disappear. We just knew that they didn't pay that well, but I was okay with.
Mhm.
I felt like it was important work. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed. Um, but in 1997, when I went back, it's like, should I expand the home business that I have,
Mhm.
or should I go back into newspapers? And I done either one, and I spent that whole summer trying to debate which one do I want to do.
Yeah.
And the internet was just really becoming a thing. And if I had known what the internet could do for home businesses versus what the internet was going to do to newspapers, I
Right.
made the other choice. But I
Right.
and so yeah, I kind of knowingly accepted a low paid career and one where in order to advance, you're gonna have to move to another place because it's not like
Right.
there's multiple newspapers in one town, right? If you want
Right.
a better job, you're gonna have to move around.
Right.
And my husband did not want to move because he had a very good, very comfortable position, uh,
Mhm.
well, teacher teaching chemistry, physics, and AP chemistry. That's like a peach assignment.
Yeah.
All kids were
Yeah.
highly motivated, college-bound.
Right.
He didn't
Right.
have behavioral I don't blame him. If he'd gone elsewhere, he might have ended up with, like, a beginning science class where he would have had
Yeah.
a less enjoyable schedule.
Yeah.
Those were joint decisions, although not
Mhm.
anyway, I wasn't able to,
Yeah.
advance there because I wasn't able to move to a bigger city and work at a bigger newspaper,
Right.
and that was fine for him because he was able to continue on, but it didn't serve me well,
Didn't serve you. Yeah. That's
and
exactly right.
this happens to a lot of women. This is not
It does. I'm looking in the chat, somebody said Social Security should recognize the years spent raising children, and it's like, that is so true.
yes, I
Um,
can see
and I
my
think the whole idea, right, I mean, the whole idea that is that I mean, which it's not at all a substitute, is not at all does not at all work in the same way, but, that you can take your spouse's, right? You can take your spouse's Social Security. Um, but that's not a substitute for, like, having that money go in, right? Having money being paid in, like, every year, and the same saying, like, money that you would be paying into, a retirement, fund at work, through work, any of those things that you'd be doing that are not doing, you're not putting money into,
Well, and
and
if I continued working for those 7 years I was at home, and again, I'm not saying that I even would have chosen differently, but if I had chosen differently,
Mhm.
I almost certainly would be, gotten a few raises in those 7 years.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have gone back to work making a as quite as low a rate as I got,
Mhm.
and in better financial shape, but my priority, we kind of had it worked out. He was gonna earn the money, and I was gonna
Yeah.
raise I would go
Yeah.
back to work
Yeah.
once they get older, and we
Yeah.
were in a about that, and, you know
And I mean, that's so common, right? It's such a common story, and it's why we had divorce reform in the first place, because before women got nothing and they just got spousal support,
Mhm.
after a divorce, and so this way there's some property involved, but it's also hard if there's not a lot of property, right? So if what you have each is sort of like you each, you know, what you earn, here we are, like there's not a lot of wealth to distribute. It's usually the home, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically it. So somebody gets the home, somebody doesn't, or somebody usually the person who gets the home often is the person if they're children who has, primary custody, or at least the person if they have joint custody who the kid's gonna live with. And there's just not a lot to divide up. So you could, have a sort of like a fund to get yourself going again if you were trying to get back into the labor market.
So, besides you know, these are the books I've written under my name. This one's
Yeah.
more of a collection of essays, and this one is a novel about, some people living in a trailer park who are all there for different reasons.
Yeah.
Also have, and I don't really talk about these books, but I have a whole slew of genre novels that I published, before I moved on to the type of writing I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And in one of them, there's a young girl who she had gotten an art degree, like an art history, degree,
Mhm.
and she was engaged to a really rich man, and he ended up being a piece of crap. And so luckily she discovered that before she got married.
Mhm.
And she meets this young man who is crazy to get married and have babies, and he's got a good job and everything. But this girl who is still a student, because she's gone back to school, is living with her older sister who has a very large family and is pregnant
Mhm.
when her husband leaves her.
Yeah.
And there's way more to the plot, but she doesn't want to get married and have babies. She's like, I'm not doing
Yeah.
it
Yep.
because it happened to my sister. And he is like, oh, I really want to marry you and have babies. And she's like, no, 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 don't want to get married and have babies. And so they break up. And eventually, the way he woos her, how a romance novel always has to have a
Ah,
happy. The way he woos her is he writes up a contract basically saying, like, we
yeah.
should go to attorney and get this, like, all legal, but
Yeah.
agree that if she wants to get married and if she chooses to have children, that he will fund her retirement
Yeah.
at a really good rate of pay and all this other stuff so that she will not ever be placed in a vulnerable position.
Yeah.
If thing did happen, if he were to die or
Yep.
just get out of the marriage or she went out of the marriage, that she will not financially suffer for having
Yeah.
married. And I thought, if I do say so myself, that was a pretty unusual romance novel.
Yeah, right. The romance of the retirement fund. I like it though. I
But
mean, it
she
is
did marry
it's it it's, yeah, it allows for romance without, like, the actual, like, economic sort of subjugation of, like, a bad marital choice. And I mean, this is, it's the same, right? It's the same, it's the same no matter what kind of marriage we're talking about, right? Like, we're like, uh however you form your family, whatever type of marriage, right? It's not just a heteronormative thing. It's happening in all kinds of marriage, and it's happening in same-sex marriages because it happens when somebody decides that like somebody has to stay home, right? There's just childcare involved, no matter, no matter what the marriage looks like. There are actually studies that the people who tend to be the best, the couples that tend to be the best at actually like splitting housework and doing chores and, like, being actually quite equitable in marriage are, like, lesbian couples. Like,
that makes
evidence shows from, like, studies, which I kinda think tracks, right? Like, show that women tend to have a better sense of how to do that and share things and, not really specialize labor in this way that, like, one person really gets slammed, right, with, like, the work and, like, the loss, and the other person, is is also then the other person is really, sort of like kept in the labor market too, and maybe a job that they don't want, right? Like maybe they have to earn in a way that they want to take a different job, but they can't. So it really sort of it locks everybody into different roles and usually highly gendered roles that don't necessarily serve people.
I also wonder, what about people who, they're both working, maybe there aren't children or their children are not, requiring full-time in-home care or something,
Yeah.
but if they keep their money separate and one person is, not making that much money and the other person is making tons of money, how
Yeah.
where, like, "I wanna buy this house. It's
Right. So I always use this
$1 house."
example. I
And
use this example with like my students because it kind of tracks with them. But like, and this was without childcare, but you think about a couple and one person, works is a partner in a law firm making tons of money. I know you've written about like law
Mhm.
firm life
Yeah,
and your partner privileges. So one person's a law firm partner, they're making tons of money, they're, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, and one person wants to be a legal aid lawyer, right?
yeah.
And they're making $60,000. And so, like, how do they manage, right? So one person's making, 6 million or 600,000, depending what firm, and one person's making 60. Like, how do you like do you do sliding scale? Like who contributes, who buys stuff? And then like when you get if and when you get divorced, what does that look like, right? I mean, there's is spousal support available, but yeah, what does that look like? And how do you make those decisions to sort of jointly spend and save and manage your money when people make such different amounts of money?
I knew a young person who said that she would not marry anybody who had, significant student loans. She was blessed not to have them. Her parents were able to pay for her college.
Yeah,
He said, like, "Oh, she wouldn't marry or date anyone who had student loans or
yeah,
significant loans." And that really kind of, like, hurt me in my heart because I knew that,
yeah,
well, my daughter has so
yeah.
many loans, and that, or would there be people out there that would reject her because they would realize that she's gonna be paying those loans for a long
I mean,
time?
that's a real class statement, right? To be like, I won't marry anybody who has student loans. I mean, you're limiting yourself to like a certain pool, right?
Yeah, but well,
Yeah,
like, Richard, the man in my special series that I run called, Poverty and Privilege for
yeah,
is
yeah.
he is sort of the mentor to a woman who she doesn't have any money even though she has an Ivy League law degree, and you'll have to read the
hmm
get the background.
I like reading that one because it really like it charts a lot of things in terms of both the education, but also like what life at a law firm looks like.
Oh, yeah, and you would think, like, she's got it made, but she obviously didn't have it
Right.
made
You're
for
not a recovering lawyer, are you?
what?
You're not a recovering lawyer, are you?
Oh, no, but you know what? At one point, I really wanted to go to law school, and there are a fair number of journalists that do
Uh-huh.
that.
Yeah,
There aren't any law schools within a driving distance of where I live.
yeah,
I'm in Central Illinois. I could go to Southern Illinois University,
yeah,
which is beyond a commute, or I'd have to go to, Chicago,
yeah,
which, you know, I'm
yeah.
right smack dab in the middle, and neither one is close. Would have had to relocate our family.
Yeah.
And I
I was just
noticed
curious because, like, the law firm descriptions and, like, the way you talk about it's very, like, very, lifelike and accurate.
well, I mean, I'm interviewing them, but also
Yeah,
I'm a researcher
yeah,
for
yeah.
30 years at
Good
newspaper
job.
and lots of time, researching all kinds of things. All I ever have done with my life, it feels like, is research. I know more stuff about more stuff, and most of it I don't. But I lost my train of thought. I'm not sure what I was gonna say, but, uh,
So Richard having, like, the different the law degrees and her having gone to the Ivy League school and
he's really
student
right.
debt.
He
Yeah.
he's been in a wealthy bubble. I don't think this is my original point I was going for, but I forget what that is. I'm gonna turn 60 next week. I forget things. So
Happy birthday.
thank you. So, the things that he has never even considered loom very large in her life. The
Right.
example that I've written about is that when her washing machine went out, this was a disaster for her.
Mhm.
And for him, it was like, you just, like, get a new washing machine.
Yeah.
How could this be a big deal? It's a tremendously big deal, and I've had many times in my life that God, when I was in college, I washed my laundry by hand sometimes if I didn't have enough quarters to go to the laundromat. I would fill up the
Yeah.
bathtub, wash my stuff by hand, wring it out, and hang it up all over the apartment to dry. And, that sounds crazy, but that was kinda normalish to me because I had a really small amount of money to live on.
Yeah.
But other people would not even think about saving a few bucks a week by doing the laundry by hand. It wouldn't even occur to some people. And some people would think, "Well, what would you do if you didn't have any money? I mean, wear dirty clothes?" So, there's, like, a million things that class brings up that you just don't even consider, like, oh god, when I had that really wealthy friend and she invited me for her birthday party at, the area's nicest country club, and you better believe I sweated over what to wear to make sure that I would not I used to go there all the time as a journalist, but
Mhm.
was very seldom there as a guest. So I wanted to make really sure that I had, right clothes and right shoes and everything.
Yeah.
She came in and I mean, she had shoes with her, but she was barefoot. And somebody else at the table said, you really feel comfortable with your wealth when you feel comfortable at this country club with your bare feet.
Right.
And I'm like, I would sooner have been shot than take off my shoes in the country club
Right.
because there's just a class difference there. There just is.
Yeah.
And that affects how you handle money. And it also affects the things that even occur to you about money. Like
Yeah.
it's just in a million different ways, people think about money in a completely different way.
Mhm.
If someone grew up with money, they've got a different mindset. Even if they lose their money, maybe their family cuts them off or something. These people, in my experience, I'm sure there's exceptions, they still think it's very reasonable to find a way to go on vacation, for instance. And like in my world, if you don't have money, you just don't go on vacation.
Yeah.
But in their world, of course, you're going to go on vacation. You'll figure out a way to pay for it because this is just a normal expense, no different than you're going to buy groceries or you're going to pay the power bill.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. And I was thinking about one of your previous posts. You were talking about marriage, and you said marriage doesn't guarantee stability any longer. So it's not actually like it's not a producer or guarantor of economic stability. And so that's an interesting change too, right? Shift in that we used to think of it as something that would promote economic stability. And I think enough women have proved that right through their divorces have proved that that's not true. But you ask kind of like, so what's it for now? Like, what do people get married now for? And I thought that was an interesting question.
Why do people get married? Because if you go way back, I have always had a keen interest in anthropology. So if you go way back, before people had a lot of stuff, when we were hunter gatherers or something, you got married basically because men and women needed each other. Somebody had to give birth to the babies. You had to have a lot of babies. Not all babies survived. You had to have a lot of babies. And when you are busy with a small baby, there's only so much you can physically do. Now, I mean, women have always worked in some way, but having your baby in some sort of a sling and gathering herbs or, weaving cloth or, the type of things that like our ancient ancestors did, you did those things with your baby. You didn't need daycare.
Mhm.
And sometimes, your sister or other relative might take care of your babies while you're out doing whatever
Yeah,
you need to do. I mean, because you raised your children in community, so
yeah,
it wasn't just you and your baby alone in your own cave all day long. You had people around you, and they helped you, and you mothered together,
yeah,
and did things together. And in those societies, I think it was just a matter of somebody's got to have the babies, and somebody else needs to go out and do the hunting and do the heavy work.
yeah,
But back then, women did an awful lot of it. Women, I
yeah.
mean, they provided like 60% of the calories that most tribes would
Right.
because you didn't just go out and catch, a wild animal every day. It's actually pretty hard to go hunting and make rules.
I would imagine. I mean, it's still the same, right? That women do a lot of the work. There's never, at least people whoever stays at home and, all of like the sociological work about the second shift and who,
Yes.
those people work and somebody still comes home and does like all the second shift work. And that's interesting. I thought what was interesting about who gets married is like if you look at marriage rates, and who is getting married, I think you kind of alluded to this in your post, but it's like it's definitely becoming more of a social status situation in terms of who gets married. I mean, you're much more likely to be married if you have gone to college, right? If you have a certain level of income, certain backgrounds, you're much more likely to be married and to want to get married. And the sort of like never married, don't want to marry. A lot of time you have low income women, and it's because there's a lot of again like great sociological work here, but they're afraid of sort of attaching themselves to a man who's going to basically drag them down financially.
Yeah. And the other thing, as people talk about trad wives, and I don't know if familiar with Cartoons Hate Her, who she
Oh
writes
yeah,
different things than I do, but she is endlessly entertaining. I just absolutely love to read her stuff, even
yeah,
if I agree with her. And even though I don't care about pop culture and she writes about that sometimes, she's got such amazingly different takes. So you should check out Cartoons Hate Her just for fun.
Yeah.
But she noted that if people are like trying to push the trad life, she's like, then you probably better go to college because the doctor or lawyer, he's not marrying a woman who's going to just stay home. He's marrying a fellow doctor or lawyer.
Yeah, this is also new too, right? Like, there's also been, like, some work done on this that, like, there's more assortative mating now, so people
Yes.
are marrying doing much more sort of marrying within, and of course, like, a lot of it has to do with, increases in women's education,
Mm.
so it's much easier to marry a woman who's a doctor now, and it was not 60 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And so you have a lot more assortative mating happening, and it is actually, right, it's strengthening or at least facilitating, and strengthening forms of wealth inequality, right? Because you have
Oh gosh. Yeah.
rich people marrying rich people, and there's not as much interclass marriage as there used to be.
No. In fact,
Yeah.
can't think of any cases in my circle where somebody really rich is married to somebody really poor. I'm sure
Mhm.
it happens occasionally, especially, I'm sorry to say this, but it's the truth. If she's really pretty, if she
Yeah.
has pretty privilege, she can probably marry up financially. Not always, but maybe.
Mhm.
But also, the other thing is going back to the 50s, a lot of times those women had at least like a year of college or
Yeah.
something.
Right.
So you were, let's say Mad Men because there's an example rather than like my cousin or something. Let's
Right.
Mad Men. So he had a bunch of money and he married a woman who didn't work outside the home, but she knew how to entertain clients. She
Right.
throw a dinner party. She knew how to dress. She knew how to set up a home that would be
Right.
impressive. And
Right.
so didn't just pick up some random woman because she was pretty, although she was very beautiful.
Hmm.
Pick someone who could that was part of how that was how she economically contributed. She could
Right.
entertain clients.
Yeah,
And
and it was kind of the golden age of the corporate wife, right? The corporate, and you still have corporate spouses again, like, uh, you know, corporate spouses in all both different and same-sex marriages, you have corporate spouses, but that was like the golden age of, doing your making your contributions to the marriage through, like, socializing, through, like, entertaining, through doing, like, all the social labor that needed to be done and that was expected to be done in a certain, like, workplace for you to survive as a couple, right? Like, it was a social expectation of, like, the corporate wife.
a man who didn't have a presentable wife who knew how to entertain was at a disadvantage in those days,
Yeah.
in those social circles.
Mhm.
Not so much in the lower circles, but even then, it seems to me, and of course, I'm going a little bit by popular culture here because I wasn't alive in those,
Yeah.
but the idea was that I think that people did a lot more of, I think people did they were joiners, they bowled together, they
Right.
neighborhood groups, women were expected to volunteer, they volunteered at the school,
Right.
maybe, you know oh gosh, I belong to a group called Altrusa, and it's like 6 of us.
Mhm.
Back in the day in my small town, that was the height
Yeah.
of that was like high society. The
Yeah.
women who, they're the really well-known women that we still know their names locally. They would show up in their fur coats for the Altrusa meeting, and now it's like just a bunch of library wearing jeans. I
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, there's like, there's again, like you like Bowling Alone, like you mentioned, like there's like Robert Putnam's work. It's
yeah.
interesting because people have to like talk about how it happened without, and sometimes they don't do this, but sometimes they actively try not to basically blame the women's movement and the whole idea that women actually got jobs as opposed to spending their time doing unpaid labor for volunteer organizations. But it brings up a good point, right? In the sense that, look, if we all are going to be participants in labor markets, as we all should have the opportunity to be, whether we end up doing it or not, that we still need to provide incentives for people to do this kind of volunteer work, right? And so
Oh,
everybody needs to be doing it, not just the women who are not given opportunities to have paid employment, but everyone, and through your workplace or somehow given the opportunity to have time off to do it, and given the incentives to do some type of like community labor.
if you I so in the last few years, I'm a member of something called Altrusa. I've joined a group called, I'm just gonna say it's a local literacy organization that meets at the
Yeah.
library. And it's like a lot of librarians and educators because my small town does have a lot of economic problems and truancy and a lot of child poverty. And so that's like a committee that's trying to do something about that. Altrusa, we buy books and provide scholarships and things like that. And then I'm not a member of Kiwanis now, but I was for years when I worked at the news.
Mhm.
And it's become a much, 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 much smaller group now. And one of the reasons is the middle management type of people that would be tasked with, like, you represent this business, go to Kiwanis or Rotary or
Yeah.
whatever. Those jobs are mostly gone.
Yeah.
That's true of my former job. It's gone.
Mhm.
So my former workplace that would pay to send somebody to like Rotary, they're not there. And so those community groups that did a whole lot of things, there's nobody to do them and there's no
Yeah.
funding because they're just shrinking and shrinking. And it used to be, it was a lot. Oh, there were, I think those started off both being all males, but at some point in the maybe early 80s or whatever, they invited in women, and then the women kind of took it over. But
Yeah.
now they can't do it either because they're the jobs that provide you to do that. They're not
Yeah.
paying for you anymore, and those middle management jobs are gone. That has really hurt civic involvement, and so
Mhm.
it was unpaid labor that women did.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
it's
it's
not.
interesting because some of the groups, like you said, there was a lot of like, say, like sex differentiation, right? So it's like Rotary was all men until they, sued them under under various, under various legal auspices. They had to start letting women in. So you had the sort of like networking groups, which were, single sex, like male dominated, and then you had, right, so the volunteer work and the volunteer boards that were single sex, also staffed, but they were sort of like, purview. They were highly gendered purviews, right, of different types of volunteer activity. Serving, both of them obviously serving sort of like the socialization and creation of networks. Um, but it's interesting how they couldn't be actually combined, or they couldn't be actually sort of like integrated in terms of gender.
The problem under capitalism, and I'm not like a wild-eyed socialist, so I'll just get that out of the way, but the problem with capitalism is that as long as you could get some people to do unpaid labor, it
Yeah,
worked great.
yeah.
But, you know,
I mean, the
I
process that this gets us right back to marriage, though, because the problem
yeah,
is they didn't just get somebody to do unpaid labor, right? They like took women out of the labor force. They had women become, right, workers in the home for unpaid, unpaid amounts, and like capitalism needs stay-at-home parents.
it just
Like it
makes
has to have it, right? It doesn't, and it's like it doesn't. It makes sense because you want somebody who does all of that work and lets the other person go to paid
it
employment.
if you can trust your spouse, and you often can't, but if you can trust your spouse, it really does make sense, at least for a few years, to have one person concentrate on taking care of the small children because babies take tremendous work. And it's
Mhm.
not a great idea for a small baby to be in extended daycare. I don't want to get into that debate, but you want to have your baby taken care of at least most of the time, ideally, in my opinion, by one person who really loves them. And sometimes you have to use daycare. I understand that. But in that case, if it were me personally, I would choose, and in fact, I did choose when I had my first. I worked part-time with my daughter. My next door neighbor did in-home daycare,
Mhm.
and I knew everything going on in that house because our houses were like this far apart. I
Yeah.
could hear everything. So, I mean, I was more comfortable putting my daughter part-time with her than I would have been in a daycare center with high turnover because we do not pay these people. It's
Mhm.
usually women working for very low wages.
Yeah.
A lot of them
Yep.
are women of color. And Jessica Calarco, who I've got a piece on Substack in which I interview her about,
Mhm.
oh gosh, what's the name of her book? Help me out. Jessica Calarco. Um, one of her, she says, "Women, America runs on women," and I'm blanking on the name of her book, but it's findable. And she actually did a really deep dive into this and on the fact that the unpaid work that women do and how it's not rewarded and how we could be rewarding it, but we've chosen not to.
I've chosen not to, yeah.
Really do a better job of this, but
Yeah.
system that women will work for free. And women who are better off and do go to back to work and have money, they're sort of, and I can't blame them for this at all, but it's the way the system is. They just push they put the work it goes downhill to like someone that's of a lower socioeconomic group. So like, yeah, she's working and making money, but a poorly paid person is cleaning her home and caring for her children.
Mhm.
So you've got some poor woman that's still kind of being exploited in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's a whole I mean, this is the thing, someone's gotta do the work, right? And it's a matter
More
of, like, who
important.
does it, and somebody made a good point, it's like, it's not just the childcare, it's also, at this point, elder care, right? And you have a
Oh yeah.
lot of a lot of people, a lot of families, I mean, we could talk about the sandwich generation a lot, but being stuck, sort of in between different types of caretaking needs and having both like children and even adult children, right? Who like you're still thinking about and supporting financially often. And then, the needs of elder care that are just growing and growing and obviously not being, addressed by the healthcare system, but that's a whole different, that's a different topic. But just in terms of like, what type of caretaking people within marriage and people within families are expected to do, there are a lot of different kinds, right? And I mean, this is one of the problems with not just marriage, but sort of like the very normative idea that we have of families, like sort of the nuclear family. It doesn't take into account sort of larger kinship networks and, ways that people have had and known about forever to sort of like manage care. Um, and, the nuclear family, like you said, really like there's a was gonna say trickle down, look at that, there's a trickle system, right, in terms of, like, right, you have, like, if somebody's got to do the work and you have, either usually, again, like a woman, but not even a woman, but somebody who's, sort of been feminized in the home, and then if they're gonna work, then they're gonna pass on the work to somebody else who generally is, again, like, underpaid, undervalued,
Well,
right?
we used to have a deal, and this was for not our ancient hunter gatherer people so much, but from the time we had men working out in the home. When we
Yeah,
left, we kind of had a deal. We told women like, well, here's the deal. You're going to marry a man, whether you want to or not. You're going to marry a man,
right.
and your job will be to take care of as many children as come along. If any of the elderly people in the family need care, you will take care of that too. You will do the cooking and the cleaning. You might do some side work like selling eggs and butter or doing textile work
Mhm.
in the home was really common for
Yeah,
everyone.
very
And
common, yeah.
but so you're gonna be working and you're gonna be doing important things, and, but you're not, in most cases, gonna get any money or maybe just a little bit of money, but you're gonna be doing a lot of work that we all know is important. We may not respect you as much as we should, but we're all gonna recognize that you're doing really important work because somebody's got taking care of kids and old people and also helping with your community many times, volunteering at the school, whatever. That's real work that is valuable work. It's not just busy work. It needs to be done by somebody. And then we told women, oh, we're going to need you to also work outside the home. And if you don't, we're going to really disrespect you. Like, okay, who's going to do all the work I used to do? Oh, you're still going to do that.
Right. I mean, the problem too is all the previous work was like really basically just given like lip service respect, right? As opposed to any type of economic or financial compensation. And it's just like, it's like all of these pronatalist movements, right? Like, oh, have children, do this, but like we will absolutely support you in no way, shape, or form as we ask you to have children. In fact, you know, we will actively take away, healthcare.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it's a rhetorical flourish of like of our, political systems, current, and our economic systems to sort of pay a lot of lip service to this idea of care and then to give it very little compensation and actual recognition.
I'm going to turn away just for a second and look at Jessica Calarco's book because it's bugging me. I should remember it. It's a
Oh,
great.
somebody's holding it together.
Yes, that's correct.
How women how women became America's safety net.
'Cause on my phone that I'm using for this live, I cannot see the questions, which is endlessly upsetting to me. I thought I'd be able to see them. And it maybe just a difference of personal technology, but you can read those questions. Can you see?
Yeah. Yeah.
Ok
I
I'm
think we've gotten most of them.
okay.
Somebody did offer that, so we didn't have to look it up. Holding it together, how women became America's safety net, yeah.
Yeah, but women didn't get a safety net in return. I mean, it
Yep.
used to be such a thing as when a woman got married, think of like the Victorian times, that man could not leave her. If he did, he was still expected to support
Well,
her.
he could,
Suppo
but
I mean, supposedly. He would
yeah,
be if you abandon your wife and children through a lot of history, say Victorian times or through the 50s, even the 60s, you would be a pariah. The other people would look down on you. That
Yeah.
some men did leave their
This is
family.
why they usually just tried to, like, institutionalize them and,
Yeah.
then move
Oh,
on.
that also happened. But the
Right.
idea at least was you made this commitment, you married her, you
Yeah.
can't or
I
you
mean,
have
you had a legal duty of support to support, and again, like very heteronormative because that was the only type of marriage available.
yeah.
You had a duty to support your wife because you took all of her property. You had all of her property rights, and she had
And
no like actual ability to own property. So you owed her a duty of support in return, but it was basically like subsistence level support, right?
and society kind of enforced that generally, not always. The idea, like I said, if a man's like, "Yeah, I abandoned my wife and kids, and I still intend to be a part of society," that didn't work so well. So you probably had some really miserable marriages,
Oh
and if
yeah.
you're off, you had people that just lived separate lives but were still
Yeah.
technically married, and that
So
meant he would still take care of the kids, and he would be free to have a mistress or something. But
yeah, certainly. I would say Victorian era, you say basically like in the at least in England, right? So right to divorce came in about 1873. So before that, like men could get a divorce, but it was only basically obviously rich men because you had to go petition parliament. And they mostly got it on grounds of adultery when and obviously they like when men who had lots of money were worried about the inheritance of their estate. They didn't want somebody who's not like a non-marital child, right? Not their wife's non-marital child to inherit the estate. So you could go to parliament and you could get a divorce. Women could not. I mean, technically they could on grounds of like severe and sustained abuse. But it was not, not a thing really. So yeah, so it wasn't actually. I mean, if you think about the fact that in England you couldn't even get a divorce until 1873, that's kind of amazing, right?
that is amazing.
And then, like, I mean, American states, you could get divorced a lot earlier, but again, a lot of time, like until like the 1850s, it was you had to go to the legislature. So, I mean, that's obviously not accessible for most people, right? Like, oh, I'll just make an appointment with the legislature and go down and see about my divorce.
So I think it's important to point out that when people say, "Well, my grandmother was very happy in her marriage," she may or maybe she was, maybe she wasn't. Uh,
Right.
I've disparaged my paternal grandparents' marriage, but I will say she kept very busy bringing him coffee and everything else he wanted and serving
Yeah.
him. And I will also say that she didn't ever say a word against him ever. But when he passed away, my grandma really started living. Now looks she wasn't, like, doing anything too crazy.
Yeah.
She a bunch of other widowed ladies after church and go to parties for fried chicken. I
Mm.
mean, but that may not sound like a wild life, but compared to where how it was before,
Yeah.
grandma was never home after grandpa died. She was
Yeah.
al he was alive. When he died, she was always gone. It was like
Yeah.
church group stuff mostly. I mean, she wasn't out doing crazy stuff, but she was busy, and I don't think she completely hated that stage of life, I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, so like you could divorce you really, until the 1970s, you couldn't get a no fault divorce. So you did have to get grounds. And
Look rid of that now too.
yeah, I mean, that was what my Substack was about this week, right? It's about like the difficulty of getting divorced and how it's a much more precarious right than a marriage right.
Mhm.
Um, because it's not a fundamental right, right? It doesn't receive like really high levels of legal protection. And it was something that women have fought over time to get, like the right, first of all, the right to divorce. It was one of the no fault divorce was one of the like platform items for Seneca Falls, right, in 1848.
I didn't know that. That's
And it
interest
took another what, like 120 years to actually get no fault divorce. And like, I mean, 69, California was the first state that allowed no fault divorce, and actually Ronald Reagan just signed it into law. And
Isn't it funny because he is sort of like, the
divorced.
fate of conservatism, and he was divorced
Yeah, he was our first divorce. I think we only have 2 divorced presidents, which would be Reagan and Trump twice and Reagan once. So,
yeah. So,
you know,
make of that what they will.
yeah, make it
But
that way you will, but Reagan definitely signed that into law, and then, New York State was the last state to adopt no-fault divorce, and that was, like, 2010.
well, we've
So
seen TV shows or movies where a couple wants to get divorced, but they can't just get divorced. So
mhm.
they're either hiring a private investigator to catch
Yeah.
one doing
Yeah,
something
yeah,
else.
yeah. They had to, like, basically, like, collaborate, right, to, like, get the grounds because you
Oh,
somebody had to, like, offer basically themselves as, tribute and
yeah.
be the
Either
one to provide the grounds for the divorce.
either your spouse really was doing something like having an affair that you could get photographic evidence was,
Mhm.
or they would, like, arrange for one of them to be.
Arrange for it, yeah. Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
in one of my favorite writers, Joan Didion, in Play It As It Lays, one of my
Uh-huh.
favorite, when she and her husband decide to get divorced, one of their friends swears in court that he saw him hit her, which he didn't,
Right,
but everybody knew he didn't really hit her.
right.
And sometimes people, just not like men didn't hit, but it was
Yeah.
kind of thing like, that's the easiest thing, we'll say he hit her.
Yeah, I mean, somebody had to give grounds, right? So you had to come up with something, and it's like, "Look, okay, I'll be at the, Hotel Splendide at 1 p.m. Like, please come find me in room 102, and please bring your camera, or
Yeah,
please bring a witness or something."
yeah,
I mean, that was like the easiest way to do it if there weren't actual grounds, right?
yeah. And grounds really should be, "I don't wanna be in this marriage anymore."
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the it's, that was a really, major win again, for women at the time who were uh,
Well,
and
for me,
women still, right? Women who like are in abusive marriages, women who are in unhappy marriages, because proving abuse, cruelty was very difficult too. It had to be like really sustained and severe. Um, I've seen cases like these were from the 50s, but the person like shot the woman and they were like, oh, but it was only once, right? I was like, "Yeah, only once." You know? Like, that's not severe and sustained. Like, okay, like,
uh,
what are you doing?
and I
So, yeah.
can't figure off the top of your head the number of cases of, women murdered. Didn't that drop pretty significantly?
Mhm.
But yeah.
Women murdered also where, like, rates of suicide went down
Oh,
with
yeah,
no-fault divorce, yeah. I mean, it's really it really is like a fundamental sort of, like, component of equal citizenship for women. And obviously, that's why, like, that's why it's under attack right now. So, the idea that you could it's a weird idea, right? The idea that you could go into a relationship and have 0 exit possibility is really, to me, so weird and, I mean, creepy and, like, violent.
and yet the popular belief is that women just can't wait to get married, they wanna trap a man.
Right.
Well, for one thing, if you weren't allowed to work, yes, you were pretty motivated to figure out a way to trap a man probably because what else were you gonna do? You couldn't do anything
Right. I
else.
mean, that's like every Victorian novel ever, right? You have,
Yeah,
like, all about the marriage market because you have to get married because you have I mean, again, this is all very class-based, obviously, it's in a class where you're not supposed to work, if you are, you know if you don't have a lot of money, even at that time, right, you're out working because you're out cleaning houses, you're out, sweeping streets, but the whole idea that, if you were in a certain social class, that, like, the marriage market was your job market, right? Like, every dance was a job talk, and there you
yeah,
were.
and if you love, if you read, like, an old romance novels or even, like, Jane Austen novels or things like that, and they're discussing, like, all the different eligible bachelors and women and, like,
Right?
the way they talk about it, it's like, "Oh, he gets 300 pounds a year." I'm like,
Yep.
so obviously he'd make a good husband. I don't know if 300 pounds is a lot or not, whatever, but you know what I
Well,
mean?
let's say Mr. Darcy had 10,000 a year, so let's just that
So,
Bingley had 5,000 and Darcy had 10,000, so
oh my god, I know the numbers.
yep. I'm
No,
also a big fan of, Anthony Trollope, and he definitely, like, gives, like, all the numbers. He just, like, lays it all out there, and he's like, "Well, they have this much, and there's an annuity, and there's, like, this much from the
but
mother and this much from the father," and
imagine if your friend was like, "I'm thinking about marrying this guy because he is an attorney and I checked and he makes $300,000 a year.
right.
On the other hand, this other guy is a doctor, but he's just a general practitioner and I think he's only making, 200,000, I don't know,
Yeah.
a year." And so, I'm definitely gonna try to marry the.
Right. Someone says there's a reason Pride and Prejudice is fiction, like, no doubt, right? I mean, even, like, Bridgerton, right? If people out there are watching Bridgerton, I mean, there's definitely, like, the better catches and the worse catches, and clearly the Bridgertons are very good catches, we are, like, led to believe.
It's like money and marriage have always, for as long as we've had money and marriage have
Yeah,
been, I mean, you
yeah.
can't separate them, and it's interesting how in different times of view, how much of that money was or was not the woman's. From the times when you get married and your husband all of a sudden owns your estate to
Mhm.
the times that it's understood that he has to keep supporting you even if the marriage is
Yep,
sour.
yep,
I we everybody at different times and cultures have done it differently, but definitely they're tied together. And now today, I think it might be fair to say that the movement is toward trying to decouple the money in marriage because
yep,
people are keeping some people, not me, but a lot of people are keeping their money separate.
yep.
She brings money to the marriage because she has an education, a career. He brings money to the marriage, and the money only they they share a part of it maybe if they buy a
Yeah.
house together, but sometimes
That's
they put equal money in. But
yeah,
how does that work if she is a teacher and he is an attorney? Or?
right.
But
Someone said it's a whole thing's a business arrangement. It's, like, totally true, right? For especially, like, in certain classes, the marriage was like, corporate mergers and, mergers and acquisitions in nice dresses, for sure. I do think, yeah, I think there's, talking to people like Gen Z, uh, people in that age range, like much more of a skepticism about combining funds and sort of like interest in like, living apart but being married, and just interested in a lot of different, um, looking at marriage from a different way
well,
and sort of like redoing.
I think we just explained why younger people are more interested in a prenup because they are trying to
Yeah.
decouple
Yeah,
marriage.
exactly. And it's interesting as prenups used to be, right? I mean, everybody thought prenups were basically just if you were one person was really rich and the other person wasn't, or they were both really rich, right? You're like just protecting family money. And that's definitely like the trend, like the new trend is prenups is away from that. It's not a protecting family fortunes things. It's a like, let's just, let's live our own lives. Let's sort of like be together in the ways we want to be together and be apart in the ways we want to be apart. And it's definitely a different vibe than I'm protecting my, 10,000 a year in Pemberley, right? Like I'm not it's
So
not that any I mean, there's still that happening, but like the popularity I think is based in something different. It's much more of a generational understanding that we don't have to do things the way that people did it before. We don't have to have joint accounts all the time. And we don't have to, I can protect these earnings. And also people have like people earn in different ways now than they used to, right? So it's like people don't always have the same, like, I have one job and I have a 401k, or, whatever. Like people have a lot of different types of assets and ways that they earn. And so I think there's a lot more interest in trying to just separate financial lives, or at least parts of it.
so the question comes up again, what is marriage for if you aren't having children together? If you have children together, you can't decouple your money
Yeah.
totally. I mean, I don't see how that would even work because it costs money. Someone's got to pay for all the costs of the children. So unless you're gonna say like you owe me $300 for this month's your share of child care this week or whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
just we do that and divide it right down the middle. But you when you mingle your genes and produce children, and you're both going to support them in one way or another, then you have to combine your money. I think somehow or other. But if
Yeah.
you people who don't have children and keep their money separate, is that even marriage? I mean, I don't mean to insult people who've made that choice, but how do you?
I think it's nice to have people define marriage in kind of different ways and see how much. I mean, we tried to push against it, right? I mean, we've like redefined marriage over time, through various, certainly legally, right? I mean, we have really like landmark decisions like Loving v. Virginia, right? Like now, it's unconstitutional to disallow interracial marriages. We have Obergefell, like same sex marriage is now affirmed. So we've like tried to push the like limits of it, but it actually hasn't really pushed it too far in the sense of, like, what marriage looks like other than, like, who's involved, right? The players are now like, more people have access to it,
Yeah.
but I don't think we've really, like, made a big effort to sort of actually change what it looks like as a financial relationship, and so I think it's kind of interesting, like, I like it, I like the idea that people are trying new things, to see what marriage can do for them, um I like it. I mean, I tend to be a marriage cynic. It's maybe one of the reasons I've never been married. Um, and I tend to think people get married basically as an expressive thing. It's a social status thing.
I,
People love being married. People love married people. Married people love each other, right? Um, So that's always like part of my view is that it's like our world is sort of organized around married people socially, and people like it, right? It's a, you know, but it's interesting. It's like, I mean, a lot of people also people marry because, like, in the way that we do things, people marry for health insurance, right? People marry
Oh,
for citizenship, right? People marry for all kinds of things that I do think are, if that's the way that you have to get them, like, that's how you get them, right? If you need health insurance and you're with somebody and you can get it by being married, like, you know, I
I
get
do
that
wonder
too.
I do wonder if in the future we might decouple some of those things because if I were an employer, I would probably question, why should I be subsidizing your spouse who I isn't doing any work for me? Why would I
Right.
be subsidizing their health care? It's
Because if we didn't, we would have to have universal health care and everyone
yeah.
would be just terrified.
So, like, in my own personal case,
Yep.
my husband and I, we would have married each other, no question about it. We've had this discussion. But, um, before he married me, he was never married before, and, he did live with, 3 different women before he married me, but he was never married.
Yeah.
And so, that's why I had the conversation, like, "Did you only marry me because in order to get, the fiancé visa, there is no shacking up visa. It doesn't
Right.
mean you have to get married." I
Yeah.
had question at some point, like, "Did we only get married because it was legally required?" I he said, and I believe him because 'cause it's been 20 years, we are quite happy that, like, no, we would have gotten married anyway.
Yeah.
It
But
does
it
but
didn't hurt, right? It was probably a reason to do it sooner rather than later.
we had to get married quite soon. There was
Yeah.
a limit of, I wanna say it might have been 90 days or something like that, and, oh my god, he, had an old baseball injury with this really wicked staple that had been put into his leg to repair his, whole leg from
Yeah.
old injury. It came working out of his bone. He got a bone infection. He couldn't even walk when we got married. So even if he could have gotten a job, we started marriage with him being unable to walk, legally unable to work, and me making crap wages at a newspaper. So we did the better for richer for poorer, for sickness and health right from the very first day,
Yeah.
and not wait because the clock was ticking. So that was how we started to get married. I had to support him, although, he did bring, a pile of euros when he came over.
Mhm.
But initially I supported him, and then he got his job as soon as he was able to walk and legally get a work, he immediately got a job.
Mhm.
And then my job got better when I went from city editor to editor of a paper. It was still shit
Uh-huh.
with less shit pay. So I was making more than him then, and then I got laid off from the newspaper, and he supported me for a while. And then in 2024, I had my best earning year ever because I published 2 books, and I had a viral article that really made
Oh, nice.
I mean, that's the one little piece on Medium that I wrote in 2024. That one story made me over $30,000.
Wow.
So in my world, that's a lot of money. That's not
That's
necessarily
good.
a lot of money for some people, but
That's great though. That's
that's
amazing.
a lot of money for me.
Yeah.
And so I out earned him that year, but he has a pretty decent, it's not a high paying job, but he definitely is producing more of the money right now because I'm cobbling together stuff and I'm still working
Mhm.
on my next book.
Yeah.
So this is like a low earnings year for me.
Mhm.
And because we put everything in the same pot, none of this really matters. He never
Right.
says, "What did you do? Did you spend that money? Don't forget, honey, I'm making all the money." He would
Right.
never, and nor would I have ever said that to him when
Yeah.
for years I was making more than him. So
Yeah.
that part of it is really good for us as a couple that we consider the money the same. Neither of us ever reminds the other of like, "I made
Mhm.
this year," because 'cause we've
Yeah.
both done it in different years. That's really good for me,
Yeah.
and we consider it we're very happy with that arrangement.
Yeah.
But would I be happy with that arrangement if I were making really good money as a high paid professional and he was just kicking around doing nothing? I would not be happy with that.
Mhm.
The fact that he's always neither one of us has been like, "Yeah, I'm just gonna let you make the money. I'm just gonna
Right.
take a nap."
Right. No, that's great. Again, that's why I think it's all really like it's very, very situation specific, right?
Mhm.
Like it matters, people's personalities, what jobs they have, what assets they have, right? Like how they want to organize things, what their plans for the future are with children, like all of it. Like it's very, very situation specific. And I mean, I kind of always wonder like what it would be like if I had to like if somebody knew what I was spending money on. I'm like, "Oh god. Oh, wow. That's something." But again, it's like, I think it goes back to what I was saying about prenups and why I think, like, the benefit of them is just, like, it's the transparency of around money, and who, just talking about it. And, if you're gonna keep something separate, like, you gotta talk about it, right?
There's a lot of people who hide money, and they say, "Oh, I've gotta have my own money for my own safety," and, like,
Right.
times that probably is necessary. I wouldn't wanna be in a marriage where I would feel that's necessary.
Right, I mean, I do understand there are situations where that is absolutely necessary, and, like, I am sorry that that person is in that marriage to begin with, right? I think, like, that's a totally separate situation where you have people who need to start saving money and who need to build up money so that they can leave a marriage, right? Like, that's a whole different thing, and that's a whole different conversation, right? That's a very particular situation where you need to, like, manage your money in a very particular way to be safe and to be strategic.
But then, again, for anybody who has, been here for the whole hour and 20 minutes, we probably should wrap up,
Oh,
but
yeah. Oh, wow.
at the very beginning, when my first marriage ended after 15 years, and I thought everything was fine, and again, I told the story of how I put my entire paycheck one week into paying off that sofa that I never even sat on.
Yeah.
That was, I'm just gonna, like, be really transparent and say that was not that was not good. And
Yeah.
so, like, would I tell everybody, like, "You should just trust your husband, it'll be fine."
Mhm.
Not saying that.
Yeah.
I do trust my husband now, I've got good reason to trust him, but, I've been really clear with him, like, when we were getting ready to celebrate our 15th wedding anniversary, I'm like, I can't help but kind of think this was when my first marriage ended, and I was really kind of put on the spot in a bad way. Like,
Mhm.
"You're not planning on going back to Holland, are you?"
Like, "Tell me your plans." Like,
You know,
"Just let me know if you're planning on, a long trip soon."
it's like I had a friend who had many pregnancy losses, and when she finally had a successful, happy, pregnancy that resulted in a live birth, she was so happy, but she didn't really relax until she got past the point that she had lost her previous babies.
Mhm.
And I was that way with my marriage too, like, that 15th year, I was really nervous, like,
I was gonna say, so, like, year 14 was a real, like, nervous year
it
for
was
you.
shared that with him, like, I thought everything was happy with my first marriage too, and then it ended out of the blue. I just kind of need you to I need you to tell me that's not gonna happen again.
Yeah,
And I feel way better now that we're past that 15. Like I said, it's gonna be
yeah,
20 couple of months.
that's amazing. Well, that's where we started, so that's a
Yeah, we should wrap up because
good place to, like, come full circle.
I didn't realize we'd been going on for an hour and
That's
22.
amazing. I mean, there's so much to talk about. Well, we'll continue, to be continued.
Yeah, yeah,
So,
I think you could talk about marriage and money. Honestly, you could do it every single
for
day,
yeah, for, like, days and days and days. Absolutely.
and there's still so many other things about money to talk about.
I
Um,
know. Well, then there's everything else. So, it's a
yeah, so
there's a
thank
lot.
you much for agreeing to do this,
Yeah,
and
this was so much fun. Thank you for suggesting it. This is
and
wonderful.
I see there's 320 people with us,
Oh,
right
that's
now, so
amazing. Thank you
thank
everybody for
you
being here.
signed in. I've really enjoyed this.
Me too. All right. Well, have a great day, everybody.
Yeah,
Go think about your prenups and go think about your marriage and your money, or you're not being married and your money like me.
I hope your marriage, if you have one, and your money, if you have any, I hope it's all good for everybody.
Right? Exactly.
Have a great
Okay.
bye-bye.
Bye.